They heard the scream long before they saw the smoke. It was a February morning in 1871, the kind where the snow crusted into sharp ridges along the stone fences and horse hooves echoed hollow across the frozen dirt roads. At the edge of Millfield, a modest English town buried in the West Riding of Yorkshire, the sky was the colour of wet wool, and behind it loomed the jagged silhouette of Millfield Asylum, 4 stories of soot-bricked authority overlooking the town like a watchful warden. The scream came from within those walls. At first, the townsfolk assumed it was routine. The asylum, after all, was not known for its silence. It was built in 1839, back when melancholia and female hysteria were valid reasons for long-term commitment. They said the place held over 100 patients, though no one could be sure. The records were locked in an iron cabinet in the superintendent's office. No one but the staff had ever seen the full ledger. That morning, Thomas Ainsley, a local chimney sweep's apprentice, was trudging through the back lanes behind the asylum, searching for bits of coal dropped by careless workers. He was 14, small for his age, with cracked knuckles and a flattened nose from more than one drunken blow by his father. When he heard the second scream, sharper, closer, he stopped. The air had changed. It wasn't just cold. It was wet, metallic. Then he saw the smoke, but it didn't rise from a chimney. It curled from beneath a rear cellar grate, thick and oddly sweet, like burning vinegar and cloves. He approached slowly, his boots crunching on brittle leaves. That's when he noticed the rusted grate wasn't fully closed. Someone had wedged a small book, leather-bound, scorched at the corners, into the opening, as if trying to block the smell or signal something. Thomas reached for the book. It was hot to the touch. Inside, the first page was scribbled in looping, frantic script. "They are not dead. They are awake. God forgive me. They are awake inside," he ran. By the time the constable arrived, the book had vanished. The grate was closed, and the cellar, once a coal storage area for the asylum, was locked from the inside, but the smell remained. Dr. Samuel Percival, the asylum superintendent, dismissed the incident entirely. A prank, likely from one of the lads in the ward. "We've had issues with forgery before," he said, with the clipped assurance of a man who had weathered bigger storms. When Constable Hewish asked why there was smoke, Dr. Percival smiled, thin, distant. "We burn old files sometimes. Privacy, you understand." The constable left unconvinced. Thomas Ainsley was not interviewed again. The town chalked it up to imagination. Millfield was no stranger to stories. There had been tales for decades. Rumours of strange lights from the upper floors, patients who spoke languages no one taught them, staff who resigned suddenly and left town without farewell. But they were just that, rumours. Still, that night, the snow fell harder than it had all winter. Trees bent beneath its weight, doors were bolted early, and somewhere in the dark above the town, a shutter creaked open on the 3rd floor of the asylum. A pale hand reached out, not waving, just hanging there, motionless. And then it slowly retracted, as if it had been listening. At the Millfield butcher's shop, the talk began with a sliver of pork and ended in a silence thick with suspicion. Mrs. Ethel Marlowe, widow of a postman and known for her vinegar tongue, claimed she'd seen a stretcher carried out the west gate of the asylum around 4 o'clock that morning, flanked by 2 orderlies and a man in a bowler hat. "Not a doctor," she whispered, leaning across the butcher's counter. "He didn't wear the coat. And he smoked something. Sweet, not tobacco." The butcher, Gerald Cotts, said nothing at first, but the next customer overheard, and the story rippled outward. By dusk, The version that reached the town hall involved a foreign man with metal tools and a patient wrapped in chains, not blankets. The asylum had always loomed large in Millfield's identity. It was the village's largest employer. It paid for the cobbled lanes on Abbey Street and donated hymnals to St. Cuthbert's Chapel. Its doctors sat on charity boards, and its patients, when seen, were quiet, pale shadows escorted through back doors and into fenced gardens. But what made the new whispers different was how quickly they spread. At the Stag and Lantern, the local public house, Silas Rook, a former carriage driver for the asylum, spoke after his third pint. "Used to fetch bodies to the crematory on Holloway Hill," he muttered. "Normal, expected. But 3 years ago they stopped calling me, said they built their own furnace, quiet-like." He tapped his temple. "Then there was the smell. Not coal, not wood. Bone has a smell." The room fell silent. Silas, sobered by his own words, excused himself and never mentioned it again. The town's parish nurse, Miriam Elwell, kept a record of unusual deaths, as was required by the 1870 County Sanitary Order. That winter, she'd noted 5 asylum deaths in 4 weeks. All men under 30, all committed for melancholia with compulsive agitation. No family had been contacted. The burial grounds adjacent to the asylum showed no fresh mounds. And yet the deaths were signed off by Dr. Percival with identical phrasing. Patients succumbed to prolonged febrile delirium. Administered laudanum per standard measure. Expired peacefully. But laudanum didn't cause burned teeth and missing fingernails, which Miriam had seen once during a rushed post-mortem exam on James Penner, a cobbler's apprentice who had been institutionalized after a breakdown in the chapel choir. She mentioned this quietly to Reverend Chalmers, who returned her gaze with a tired nod and gently suggested she stop attending the weekly health review meetings. "For her own peace," he said. Still, the whispers thickened. Children claimed the bells of the asylum tower rang at midnight, though there had been no bell installed since 1846, when the original iron was removed due to sleep disruption among the female ward. One boy, Ned Wilby, aged 9, swore he heard a voice in Latin from the asylum grounds during a snowfall. Not shouting, just saying things, like prayer but angry. His teacher punished him for lying. But his father, Oswin Wilby, a groundskeeper, later told the apothecary that Ned had woken with bleeding ears that night. The doctor called it frost rupture. But Oswin began sending his son to Leeds to live with an aunt the following week. Even shopkeepers began to notice the strange rhythms. Deliveries to the asylum changed. Bread and meat orders decreased. But linen, surgical gauze and chloroform bottles increased. The town's chemist, Edgar Holt, noted a sharp uptick in the purchase of ether and carbolic acid, but none of the general practitioners admitted ordering it. "It must be a new regimen," said Dr. Percival when asked. "The brain is a sensitive machine. Requires precision," he said, machine without blinking. By the 3rd week of March, the snow had begun to melt in jagged strips across Brackenfield Road, revealing dead grass and frost-blistered stone. But the cold inside the town deepened. The choir at St. Cuthbert's ceased rehearsals. The school closed its upstairs rooms due to draft concerns. 2 shopkeepers sold their leases and left without goodbyes. And in the asylum, 3 windows on the top floor were bricked up in a single night. No scaffolding, no mortar buckets left behind. When asked, the warden at the front gate simply shrugged. "Renovations," he said. But it was Reverend Chalmers who voiced what many had begun to feel but dared not speak. "Whatever we've been told about Millfield Asylum, he said in his Sunday sermon, may not be the whole truth. And silence, too long held, can rot a soul like wet timber. He did not preach again for another month. In the public archives, a single page was later found tucked into the parish birth registry for 1871. It was out of place, clearly not official. Handwritten, unsigned, and slightly scorched along the edge, it read, "They say we whisper too much. But I believe it's not the whispers that kill us. It's what we refuse to say out loud." Long before Millfield Asylum earned its reputation for shadowed corridors and missing names, there had been talk of the Blakely twins. Edmund and Elias Blakely, born in 1856, were registered in the village birth ledger with clean, looping script. Their father, Orson Blakely, a chemist turned theologian, relocated to Millfield in 1854 to serve as a spiritual consultant at the asylum, an unofficial role, unpaid, but granted peculiar access. Their mother, Lenora Blakely, never appeared in parish gatherings and was often described in records only as delicate of constitution. The twins lived in a house just across from the asylum's western wall, near the sycamore hedgerow that separated the institutional grounds from the town proper. By the age of 8, both boys had stopped attending the public school. According to the Millfield Education Ledger, 1864, the reason listed was exceptionally nervous temperaments, susceptibility to auditory hallucination, recommendation for private tutelage under asylum direction. No one in town remembered seeing them again in daylight. By 1871, the Blakely home had fallen into quiet disrepair. The wooden fence tilted eastward. The shutters stayed drawn. Once, a delivery boy left milk bottles at the step, only to return hours later to find them filled with blue-dyed water instead. Whether prank or sign, he refused to deliver again. Inside records show that only Elias Blakely remained. Edmund, the elder by 17 minutes, had been formally committed to Millfield Asylum at age 14, under the diagnosis of paroxysmal fugue and self-harmful ideation, signed by Dr. Percival himself. No one in town had been aware. The asylum, under its 1859 confidentiality mandate, was not required to report patient admissions unless legal custody was disputed. But a note tucked into the bottom of Elias's 1870 journal, discovered years later beneath a loose board, offers another version. Edmund did not wish to go. He screamed when they came with the collar. He said he could still feel her breath. I said nothing. I watched. It was unclear who her referred to. Elias Blakely had been seen in town only once in the last year. That sighting came from Rose Porter, the seamstress's daughter, who described a pale-faced man standing barefoot in the chapel yard during the feast of St. Agnes. He was whispering to a tree, she said. When approached, he turned and smiled, not at her, but past her, as if seeing someone else. His lips were cracked, his fingernails blackened with ink. He vanished down the hill and was never seen again in public. Inside the asylum, Edmund Blakely was transferred to the subterranean treatment quarters in February 1871, according to a faded movement log unearthed in the 1920s during restoration work. These underground rooms had been sealed off since a patient revolt in 1862, yet Edmund's name appeared 3 times in the lower ledgers. Each entry marked with a single Latin phrase, in situ, corpus vigila translation, in place. The body watches. Whether this was medical terminology or something else remains unknown. A former nurse, Agatha Lorne, gave testimony in 1904 to a provincial inquiry about odd protocols during her training years. She recalled a boy who sat perfectly still for hours, humming music that hadn't been played aloud. She never gave his name, but her diary later surfaced in her granddaughter's estate sale. The entry dated March 3rd, 1871 read, "They asked us to watch only from behind the mirror, not to speak. Never to enter his room without the tablet. I still dream of his eyes. How could he hum with no tongue?" The Blakely family line ended abruptly. Orson Blakely died by hanging in his study in April 1871. The coroner listed it a suicide, though the chair beneath him had not tipped. Lenora Blakely was committed to the women's ward 2 weeks later, unresponsive and catatonic. She died in 1874, officially from neural collapse and malnutrition. Elias Blakely's body was never found, but in a corner of the Millfield Parish archive, inside a drawer mislabeled plumbing receipts, 1880s, a letter was discovered written on torn hymn paper. "I have sealed the tongue and closed the voice, but he still listens through walls. The air is thin now. I cannot remember if I was born or only made to be his echo." It was signed E. Blakely. The house across from the asylum stood empty for 23 years before it was torn down. Workers reported tools vanishing, and more than one man refused to enter the basement. One thing, however, was found during the demolition: a rusted tin box behind the hearth, inside which was a child's drawing, twin stick figures standing in front of a window with no glass. Their heads were sketched as perfect black circles. No mouths, only eyes. On the morning of March 12, 1871, a nurse named Martha Kilbride left Millfield Asylum and walked to the rectory in her nightclothes. It was barely past dawn, the frost still blooming on the chapel gates. Her slippers were soaked through, her fingernails rimmed in dried blood. She spoke a single sentence to Reverend Chalmers, who would later record it in his prayer log with deliberate underlining. "They are removing pieces before the soul is done." Then she collapsed. At first, her actions were attributed to overwork. Asylums in that era often rotated night staff without rest. But when Dr. Percival arrived to retrieve her, something in his expression unsettled the vicar. A deep calm, too still to be ordinary. "She will be reassigned," Percival said, taking her by the arm as one might collect a tool left behind. We thanked the parish for its vigilance. He never allowed her to speak again in public. That week, James Featherly, a travelling tinsmith lodging at the Abbey Road Inn, reported something stranger. He had taken the road behind the asylum en route to the railway stables. The morning was wet and grey, with low cloud cover hanging like spoiled wool above the sycamores. At precisely 6:47 a.m., he claimed, he saw a fire in reverse, flames rising from a second-story window, yet leaving no burn marks. Instead, frost spread outward from the sill, crawling up the stone like ivy. It didn't melt, he later told the innkeeper. It froze things solid. And someone was looking out. But their eyes were wrong. He didn't elaborate. He checked out that afternoon. Meanwhile, inside the asylum walls, records grew strange. The patient, behaviour ledger, recovered decades later from beneath a collapsed filing cabinet, contains an entry for March 13th describing vocal displacement in the West Wing. At 3:10 a.m., the hall was filled with vocalizations, varied, layered, seemingly simultaneous. No patients were speaking at the time. Source unverified. Duration, 3 minutes, 22 seconds. Another entry from March 14th notes, experiment initiated in room 12B. Subject silent. Body responds to proximity of surgical tools despite full restraint. Right hand moved 1.3 inches when scalpel presented. No heartbeat recorded at the time. Who documented this is unclear. The log is unsigned, but alongside it, a margin note in different handwriting reads, "Remove nothing without his attention." The eye may sleep, but the organ never forgets. Later that week, a parish boy, Colin Mearns, age 11, was found in the graveyard behind St. Cuthbert's, sobbing uncontrollably and clutching an iron key. He said he had been playing hide and seek with the other boys, but no one else was found, and Colin couldn't explain why his boots were wet with ink or why he couldn't stop humming an unfamiliar tune. His mother claimed he hadn't spoken again since that night. When examined by a physician, a strange symbol was found on his tongue. A small cross, not burned or cut, but darkened beneath the skin, as if it had grown there. The asylum denied ever issuing keys to local children. Then came the chapel incident. During Sunday service on March 19th, just as the parishioners stood to sing the recessional hymn, the air inside the church dropped sharply. The gas lamps flickered, though there was no draught. And then, without warning, every pane of stained glass shattered outward, not inward, as if repelled from within. No wind followed. No quake was recorded. But the damage was complete, and at the foot of the altar lay a single object, a leather-bound surgical journal, scorched at the edges and bound shut with what appeared to be braided hair. Though police were called, the asylum's warden retrieved it before investigators arrived. When pressed later by town councillors, Dr. Percival merely said, "Certain materials belong to institutional history, not public spectacle." He would not allow the book to be examined, but several townsfolk, Miriam Elwell, Silas Rook, and even Reverend Chalmers, noted a change in the parish that week. The organ pipes had ceased working, though no damage could be found. The pews creaked even when empty. And late at night, lights flickered on in the chapel, though no oil was left in the lamps. The final straw came from a source almost forgotten, a telegram. It was received at Millfield Post Office on March 21st, stamped from Cambridge University's Department of Medical Inquiry. The archivist at the station, an old man named Edwin Page, recorded its contents in his private notebook, which was discovered years later after his death. The telegram read, "To Dr. S. Percival, Millfield from Dr. E. Harrow, Cambridge Medical. Confirm. Have you perfected the removal method while retaining functionality? Previous specimen failed post-excision. Recommend caution with subject 3. Advise no further removals until full neural response logged. A." It was never delivered. Edwin, unnerved, kept it instead, and that evening he resigned. Within days, whispers had turned into half-spoken fears. Children were kept home. Church bells were muted. And a rumour spread quietly among the older residents that the asylum no longer treated the insane. It billed them. By March 24th, 1871, Millfield was no longer whispering. The silence had thickened into dread. Children were kept indoors. The bell at St. Cuthbert's remained still, and the air carried something invisible, yet unmistakable, like the lingering scent of burnt iron and forgotten prayers. The asylum had closed its outer gates entirely. Deliveries were accepted only at dawn under escort. The west-facing windows, once open for air, were now sealed shut with iron brackets, as noted in a builder's invoice recovered from the Millfield archives. Q-tie, 17 iron latch reinforcements, model number 3 lockfast, note, for use on interior-facing frames, paid by Asylum Officer G. Winch. No further comment recorded. That same week, Eliza Moray, a housemaid for the magistrate, vanished while walking home after dusk. Her path, confirmed by lantern boys, passed the edge of the asylum's boundary wall. She never arrived. A search party combed the hedgerow and nearby fields for 2 days. Nothing. Until, at Millfield Washhouse, her apron was found folded neatly atop a stone basin, wet and stained with a dull black residue that refused to wash away. The town constable suggested she had run off with a former suitor. Her mother disagreed. Eliza didn't believe in love, she said. She said it made people look away from what's real. One man refused to look away. Richard Selwyn, a former patient clerk at the asylum, had quietly kept a duplicate record of patient movement logs between 1869 and 1871. Fired 6 months prior for inconsistencies in order compliance, he had returned to Millfield to care for his aging father and to reckon with what he'd once ignored. He brought his notes to Reverend Chalmers on March 26th, requesting the names be recorded in holy ink. According to Chalmers' journal, Selwyn spoke with dry, deliberate urgency. There were removals, Reverend, not deaths. I was told to strike names, not cross them, not explain, just erase. Entire entries. Gone. When asked what kind of patients were removed, Selwyn hesitated. Only the ones who got quieter. Never louder. The ones who stopped praying and started humming. The Reverend asked to see one of the logs. Selwyn hesitated, then pulled a torn sheet from his satchel. It was brittle, curled at the corners. 7 names were listed, each with the same final note: transferred, room theta. There was no theta wing listed on any asylum map. The townsfolk began to act. A group of men from Abbey Street, led by Jasper Rigg, a carpenter and former militiaman, marched toward the asylum's rear fence with lanterns and tools. Their plan, according to Rigg's widow, was to demand entry, search the west wing, and force the doctor to explain the ledger. They never returned. Only a single lantern was found, smashed against the outer wall. Its glass was not shattered outward, but inward, as though pressure had pulled it in. No charges were filed. Dr. Percival released a public statement that simply read, "The asylum remains committed to public safety and proper treatment. We mourn the confusion." The paper ran the statement in full, without edit, but the printer, Thomas Fenn, reportedly resigned the next morning, citing illness. Elsewhere, fear turned inward. Miriam Elwell, the parish nurse, suffered a nervous collapse after waking to find dozens of pages missing from her health ledger. Pages that had detailed unexplained patient injuries from the asylum, dating back over 4 years. Her apartment showed no signs of forced entry, but the window latch had been undone. When friends helped clean her home, they discovered a strange item beneath her bed, a wax cylinder labelled Echo 4 Blakely. No device in town could play it. The asylum owned the only phonograph in the district. When Chalmers attempted to request access, the asylum clerk replied in writing, "Our devices are reserved for clinical use only. The Blakely material is restricted to internal auditory testing. We cannot accommodate public inquiry." The letter bore no signature. By the end of March, a quiet exodus had begun. 5 families moved to nearby Otley and Skipton, citing climate concerns. One shopkeeper locked his storefront and left a chalkboard note, "Gone to join my brother. No bread here." At night, the town was still. But sometimes, around 3 a.m., those who still listened claimed to hear a sound, faint, rhythmic, from the asylum's upper floors. Not music, not screams. A heartbeat, measured, deliberate, louder when the wind was still. A letter found in the Millfield Town Council minutes, unsigned but believed to be written by Edgar Holt, the town chemist, concluded with this line: "I fear that whatever they sought to excise, they have only taught to remember." The body forgets pain, the mind forgets suffering, but something else remembers. Beneath the floor, behind the brick, in the breath of those who hum. It wasn't until 1912, during renovations to the Millfield Rectory's East Wing, that the oldest clue surfaced. Behind a false panel in the attic, sealed with pitch and nailed from within, workers discovered a wrapped parcel of dry cloth, stitched shut with horsehair. Inside were 5 items: a leather physician's satchel, cracked at the hinge, a single, blood-speckled scapula, human, according to later records. A sealed envelope addressed to the Office of Provincial Ethics, a hand-drawn blueprint of Millfield Asylum's original foundations, and a small wooden cross, blackened at the base as though scorched from within. The satchel bore the initials EH, carved faintly into the underside of the clasp. Though the envelope's contents were never officially released, a carbon copy surfaced decades later, filed in the York Medical Inquiry Archives. Reference: Number E, H3/1912. The author identified himself as Dr. Edwin Harrow, a Cambridge surgeon previously known for experimental work in neurological mapping. The letter, dated February 1871, detailed an agreement. "I have come to Millfield at Dr. Percival's invitation. What he claims, if true, defies known medicine. If a portion of the brain can be removed without destroying consciousness, it suggests not damage, but storage, as if memory can relocate. I remain skeptical. But the specimens he showed me were not asleep. They watched. One boy hummed a song I'd never heard. Yet I wept. Harrow's name had appeared before, in the unsent telegram recovered by Edwin Page. But this letter, buried in a church attic, confirmed he had not only consulted on the asylum's procedures, he had witnessed them. Accompanying the satchel was the blueprint, drawn in iron gall ink and dated 1838, a year before the asylum's founding. It showed a layout inconsistent with all known maps. Instead of 4 levels, the blueprint revealed a 5th, substratum level, theta chamber, a circular room, 36 feet in diameter, accessible only through a vertical passage descending from beneath the central stairwell. The chamber had no windows. Its walls were lined with 12 alcoves, each numbered. Beside the plan, a scribbled note read, "One for each trial. Only those who cease to speak may hear what lies beyond." E. B. The initials likely referred to Edmund Blakely, committed as a teenager and later referenced in asylum ledgers as the subject of Experiment 3. No official building records ever acknowledge the 5th level. Yet when the North Yorkshire Historical Society conducted a geophysical survey in 1976, anomalies were detected beneath the old asylum site, specifically a circular void measuring approximately 11 meters across, 4 meters deep. The survey team requested excavation. Permission was denied. The grounds had already been sold and repurposed by then for a municipal car park. Among the most chilling confirmations came not from medical archives or architectural records, but from a personal letter found among the effects of Reverend Chalmers, who died in 1873 of what was then called exhaustion of the soul. The letter, never sent, was addressed to the Diocese of Ripon, dated March 29, 1871. "I believe the asylum no longer seeks to cure minds, but to unbuild them. There is something mechanical in their new work, something deliberate. They do not wait for madness to Come, they harvest it. They sculpt it. They pare away what resists. One of the orderlies told me, drunkenly, that patients are kept awake during the procedure. Not bound, but calmed. Calmed with something in the air. They do not scream. Not once. But afterward, they hum. Always the same tune. Like a lullaby remembered from before birth. I no longer trust myself to pray. In a final curious twist, a page from the Millfield Gazette, dated April 2nd, 1871, included a short, easily missed announcement. Dr. Samuel Percival to leave Millfield in April. No reason given. Succeeded by Dr. Henry Carrow. Asylum closed to public for renovations. No further mention of Dr. Percival appears in regional papers after that date. His death was never recorded in Millfield or the surrounding counties. No photographs remain. But in the Cambridge Medical Journal, an 1873 article appeared under the initials SP, detailing a theoretical advancement in surgical neurology. The article contained no references, no case studies, and one peculiar closing line. In time, even breath may be optional. What matters is attention. Attention remembers what the flesh forgets. No one knows who approved its publication. As the pieces reassembled across decades, blueprints, letters, testimony, it became clear that Millfield Asylum was not merely a site of institutional failure, but perhaps something worse. An experiment no one was meant to remember. Yet fragments endured. In attic walls, parish drawers, sealed boxes mislabeled as plumbing forms. Not enough to explain everything, but enough to confirm one truth. Something happened in 1871, something removed, erased, and still humming beneath the surface. The final recorded event inside Millfield Asylum occurred on the night of April 3rd, 1871, and it remains one of the few moments where official history, private testimony, and physical evidence align, if only briefly. It began with a power failure. The asylum, one of the earliest adopters of coal gas interior lighting in West Yorkshire, reported a full outage at 9:14 p.m., logged by night technician Walter Ibbotson. In his surviving maintenance report, recovered from the county sanitation depot, he wrote, "All internal lamps extinguished. Backup lines refused ignition. No leaks, no wind. Air felt charged, like iron struck near water. Hallways became unnaturally quiet. No footfall, no birds outside." He underlined that last sentence 3 times. At 9:27 p.m., a nurse named Ruth Halden, newly assigned from Leeds and unaware of the deeper rumours, attempted to enter the theatre passage, marked "Boiler Access, Restricted." She had been instructed to retrieve emergency blankets stored in the sub-basement. She never returned. Later accounts from surviving staff, relayed years later under aliases, claimed they heard the metal elevator cage descend. But it never rose again. They said the rope snapped mid-ascent, and then the humming began. At first it was low, a single note, then layered, harmonic, dissonant, overlapping in cycles of 3. Not mechanical, human, from every floor, from every wall. The walls sang, one porter wrote anonymously in 1899. Not loud, but close, as if they remembered. At 9:31 p.m., the western gate was found unlatched. A groundsman, Alton Cray, abandoned his post and ran 2 miles to the post station in Haverfield, where he pounded on the door shouting, "They've gone quiet, all of them, even the ones who weren't meant to be quiet. They're not asleep, they're listening." When authorities arrived at first light, the asylum stood intact, no damage, no flames. But every door was unlocked, every window was unlatched, as if opened from inside, and every patient, 64 in total, was gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle. The only object left in the central atrium was a chair facing the stairwell, with a folded paper on the seat. On it, in thin pencil, one sentence: "He has finished remembering." The cellar was bricked up within days. No official inquiry followed. The town, already battered by fear, accepted silence. The Millfield Courier ran no obituary. The asylum closed quietly. Over the next decade, documents vanished from public access. Medical ledgers destroyed in a fire. Blueprints misfiled. Council minutes redacted. The event was reduced to a single entry in the North Yorkshire Medical Record. April 1871. Millfield Asylum decommissioned. Grounds unsafe. Patients relocated. No names listed. No mention of Theta. Yet one final record remains. A diary discovered in 1934, hidden behind a false wall during renovations to the Ashbridge Sanitarium, 20 miles north. The diary belonged to Dr. Edwin Harrow, presumed dead decades earlier. His final entry, dated April 3, 1871, reads, "Percival insisted the final stage could proceed, that the subject's mind, now stripped of distraction, could open fully. He called it the listening brain. I protested. He laughed, said the heart is a distraction, the lungs a luxury. The brain, when refined, becomes something else, an antenna, not for thought, for memory that never dies." He brought the boy in, Blakely, eyes open, humming they sang together. 12 voices in a circle. He told me to stay, to witness. I refused. I ran. The final page of the diary bears no words, only a drawing, a ring of seated figures, mouths stitched, heads tilted upward. Above them, floating, a single black circle. No eyes, no limbs, just the hum. In 1971, on the centennial of the closure, a local historian named Iris Delaney attempted to write a retrospective for the Millfield Historical Quarterly. Her draft was never published. She abandoned the project after visiting the site, now paved as a car park behind the Civic Library. She later told her husband, "There's still something under the ground. You don't hear it. You feel it, like a name you've forgotten, trying to return." When she died in 1986, her journal contained one last note: "It remembers you before you remember it." By summer of 1871, Millfield Asylum was already a husk. The great iron gates, once polished to reflect candlelight, sagged with rust. The windows, unshuttered in haste, gaped like sockets long since emptied. The villagers passed by quickly, eyes averted, children told to hush when they lingered too long near the hedgerows. The official record was thin, deliberately so. In the quarterly report of the North Riding Board of Health, a single line summarised what had taken place. Millfield Asylum closed due to structural deficiencies. Patients transferred. Staff dispersed. No list of names, no site photographs, no mention of the disappearance. It was as if the asylum had been excised not just from stone, but from memory itself. And yet, fragments persisted. In 1874, a solicitor from Leeds named Harold Cray filed a private claim against the county on behalf of his cousin, one of the vanished patients. His documents included a witness affidavit describing a sound low and constant beneath the earth. The court dismissed the suit. The affidavit was stricken from the record, but Cray's personal notes survived in the Yorkshire Legal Archives. The silence is cultivated. They do not wish us to ask. Yet I fear the thing they buried was not silence at all. It hums still. I have heard it in my dreams. In 1889, children playing near the chapel ruins uncovered a box, lodged deep in the roots of a sycamore. Inside were 3 items: A cracked mirror, a child's doll missing its head, and a folded piece of parchment. The parchment bore one line: "No voices lost, only loaned." The items were reburied after a priest refused to keep them inside the church. Within a year, the sycamore was struck by lightning. It never sprouted again. By the early 20th century, the asylum had slipped into folklore. Some villagers claimed it had been a prison, others that it was a workhouse. Few remembered its true purpose. Even fewer admitted their parents or grandparents had worked there. But records in the British Medical Gazette, 1907, hint otherwise. In an article reviewing advancements in neurology, a single anonymous submission described the Millfield trials in passing. Though lost to fire, the notes on cranial segment removal suggested a consciousness not extinguished, but concentrated. What is excised may not perish, it may only relocate. The article was retracted the following year, with an apology to readers for editorial misplacement. And then, silence, until the 20th century excavations. In 1976, when the site was paved for the new municipal car park, ground-penetrating survey revealed the circular void beneath the foundations. Engineers dismissed it as a natural sinkhole, though the shape was too precise, the depth too consistent. Construction proceeded anyway. But the workers who poured the asphalt left accounts found later in the Oral History Project of North Yorkshire Civic Records. One reported his boot stuck fast in the soil, as if gripped by suction. Another swore he heard humming through the concrete mixer's roar. A third refused to work past sundown, claiming he saw faces behind the dirt, still breathing. The foreman logged the complaints as superstition. Today, the site is unremarkable. Rows of painted spaces, a yellow pay booth, the smell of exhaust. Commuters park without noticing the hollow beneath. The civic library casts its shadow across the tarmac, hiding the contours of what was once the asylum's western wall. But locals still talk. Some say the air dips colder between spaces 12 and 18. Others claim that if you leave your car unlocked at night, you may return to find the radio humming static on a single low frequency. The hum never records, but those who hear it swear it is layered, like multiple voices breathing in unison. The last written testimony came not from Millfield, but from a visiting archivist in 1983 who had come to catalogue forgotten parish papers. Her diary, later donated to the University of York, ends with this line: "The worst part is not the silence. It is the memory that waits beneath it, patient as stone, knowing that one day someone will listen long enough to let it speak again." Millfield Asylum no longer exists on maps. Its story lies scattered, in burned ledgers, missing minutes, misfiled blueprints. Enough to hint, never enough to prove. But the fragments, when reassembled, paint a portrait more chilling than fire or plague. A place where memory was cut, stored, and made to sing. A place that hummed beneath the earth, and perhaps still does. What do you think truly happened at Millfield Asylum in 1871? Were the patients victims of medicine gone astray, or of something far older, something that still lingers beneath forgotten foundations? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of history's darkest corners.